I come from Meghalaya. We are a very small state, ecologically fragile. We have a very rich natural capital. We have customary laws. We have traditional systems of governance. Under the Constitution of India, we also are protected by the sixth schedule. And as a microcosm, so essentially, even a district in UP or perhaps even a district collector in Bihar probably controls a larger population than the entire state of Meghalaya has. But of course, we then have a geographical forest area, which is 75% of the geographical area, highly dependent, the community is highly dependent. We will come to those issues and talk about how community centric governance has been the core of most of these hilly states, including Meghalaya, in governing the sharing, allocation of resources such as water, use of forests, and also the fair use of water. But we'll see that gaps do exist. Do we create new systems? Some governments love to inaugurate new agencies. You can announce a new institute, you can announce a new department. So in Meghalaya, we have a Meghalaya Basin Development Authority. It's a convergent authority, it's a department. We keep talking about silos. So here, this is an attempt to bring different departments into one to solve problems at the basin level. So I myself have come from Government of India on deputation to the Government of Meghalaya. So you also have an Institute of Governance. That's my affiliation here, even though I'm not formally affiliated. And there, the flagship program is the Meghalaya Legislative Research Fellowship, which provides support and guidance to serving legislators to develop coherent questions and to also develop good policies and also to develop constituency development plans. I can go on about Meghalaya, but I think now what we need to get with this panel, we have such a distinguished panel here, is to actually come up and see across the country and across the world what are the different lessons that we can get. And we should also focus, I request the panel to keep it brief. I've been told we have a big clock there, I didn't notice that we have to kind of have it in a way, instead of having a diagnosis and say we have problems. Surely we have problems, that's why we're here. Let's come up with solutions, let's come up with blueprints. And on that note, I'd like to invite Mr. R.K. Arora, distinguished border security personnel, to start off with the notion of border security and how it poses threats to our gaps there, poses threats to our internal security, and whether any innovations involving working or converging with communities in those border areas are helpful in protecting our borders. I feel that if we could answer that question well, then we can move on to the other three questions by the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thanks to ORF and Nalanda University for providing this platform. So our theme of the session deals with the issue related to governance and the public policy, particularly related to the development demand and rising issues, then issue related to the state capacity, fiscal pressures, issue related to the international practices and learning from them. And third is related to what we can do for the long term for the sustainable public policy issues. As I come from the practitioner background, I served with the Government of India for almost 3 decades and working on the ground. So I will try to correlate the practical issue with the governance related issues and with some of the case studies. All are aware that Operation Sindoor is still in our minds and heads and talk of the towns. And we have discussed about the borders. So I will be talking on the borders, like what are the governance issue on the borders and related issues, and how the local involvement can improve the system. So if we see our border, eastern and western, is more than 15,000 kilometers long. And we, even if we talk about the western area only, there are different states, Jammu Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat. Similarly, if we go to east, there is a Bengal, whole northeastern states, UP, they are sharing the boundaries. So they are having a different problem, different challenges. We are facing narco-terrorism now these days. Even drones are flying every day over our borders. Yesterday, even you must have heard the incident of a lot of drones are reported in the Jammu and Kashmir. So day by day, the challenges are emerging up and issues are escalating. And now some people say after the Operation Sindoor, borders are becoming irrelevant because the intervention or barrier which we created on the borders are not relevant. But I argue that now borders are becoming more relevant because technology also have some of the limitations. If you are using technological solution from your territory, that may impact. We have seen during the Operation Sindoor also how the air power was used from the distance and the calculations and the cross-border issues. So when we discuss about the border relevance, it will be there. And in fact, by the use of technology, I think it will further improve. One question in between, anybody knows how many forward posts in the western border was targeted during the Operation Sindoor? When I say forward post, this is FDL, border outposts. Anyone? I think not a single. So all the target were deep into the territory, the vital installations. None of the forward post was targeted by the enemies. So the border will be relevant and their utility will be there. So improve our border security system. We must go deep into the governance model, public policy model, what long-term, short-term measure we need to take. So when we talk about the learning from the international practices, I think if we compare our borders, I think western border can be compared with the US-Mexico border. The similar challenges, similar length, similar type of issues. And if we talk about the Israel border also, that's a very small border, although they use very high-tech gadgets and technology. But I think we are not learning from their mistakes. If you talk about the US-Mexico border, they implemented the Arizona Technological Plan after the failure of SBI net in 2014, where they spent billions of dollars, but they could not succeed. And they withdrawn that plan. And in 2016, again, they withdrawn the Arizona Technological Plan when the Trump in his last term passed the resolutions to creating a Trump wall on the Mexico border. So even we saw that both the massive technological plan failed on the US-Mexico border. Still, we start implementing the 2016, the CIVMS, Comprehensive Integrated Border Management System, costing 80,000 crores. And even the fiscal pressure was there. Government was not having that sort of a cater for money for that plan, and that project was collapsed after 2 pilot projects. So that's the gap we could not estimate from the international practices or international learning. And even when we calculate the human resources and the technological cost, I think we should follow some different model, because we are having a more human resources which can be utilized optimally on the borders. And next point I would like to make, like in the Indian context, if we talk about the border security, I generally advocate for the 4 components which are very critical. First is the boots on the ground, people who are deployed on the ground. Second is the technological solution being used on the border area. Third is the border security infrastructure, like what type of infrastructure you are creating in the border areas. And fourth and most important, which I talk about, is the local environment. when I say local environment, is include the relationship between the state and the central government, relationship with the people of the border, local administrations, and the cordial relations between the various agencies. So this fourth pillar is very critical and important for the indigenous perspective, because we are having long borders. It's very difficult to deploy very expensive technological solutions which are not financially viable. So if we compare this, that's why I was saying different states are having different policies. We carried out a study on the border area development program, which is sponsored by Government of India. We found that all the states are implementing these border area development program in different way. All those schemes, guidelines, rules are same, but the implementation execution processes are different. That's why now, after I think 7-8 years, Government of India have redrafted those border area development guidelines. So these type of challenges are there. The capacity of the states is also very important pillar. Like some of the access states want to extra access in the border regulations, and some of the states, they don't have a capacity to support even central agencies to secure the borders or develop the borders. So we need to have a very ideal, or I will not say ideal, it's a sort of a practical approach where we can integrate all these four pillars, which the technological solutions, boots on the ground, border security infra, and the cordial relation between the local environment, so that we can have a long-term sustainable border security apparatus. In this, I think development is very key component. Unless we develop the areas, it's very difficult to sustain the border security. So when we talk about the development, I gone through various areas, and our team has submitted few recommendations, like why we cannot think about a road from Tannod to some to have an experience of the desert, drive through the desert, because youth can have a drive through that roads during their visit to Jaisalmer. Why we can't have a solar system installed beyond the fencing, where the huge area is lying unutilized between the international border and the fencing, where we can generate some resources, and there are some development issues. So similar issues we have projected to the policymakers, and we shared on the different platforms, like this type of, or involvement of the local youth, border area youth, for the border security capacity building. We have also argued. In fact, now we are talking about the Agniveers. I think in 2017-16 we talk about the border volunteers on the similar pattern. Why we are not engaging the youth in the border area which are not employed, or they are involved with the criminal activities, they are involved with the drug cartels? Why we are not able to engage them? So there are few issues. If we address those issues collaboratively, collectively, with the central support and the state government active participations and the serious execution by the implementing agency, I think we can move forward with some of the sustainable solutions for the border security, and we can have our own way for this system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arora. Very concise, precise, and actionable points. So now having finished at the border, we want to move inward. So I'd like to invite Anjali Mathai to kind of just raise one or 2 points about good governance systems that exist within our country. May it be in a state level, may it be in whatever that you have experienced. Keep it brief, 5 minutes. Speak into the microphone, because it seems people at the back are not able to pick up sometimes. Do you need a microphone? Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Firstly, I'd also like to thank the Observer Research Foundation and Nalanda for having me here. I represent the Synergia Foundation, which is a think tank, a Bangalore-based think tank that works at the intersection of geopolitics, security, and emerging tech. So this is really quite an interesting place for me to be and to hear everyone's point of view on the issues that are being raised. In terms of how states can go forward, can develop, what can we do to what can we do to advance AI, to develop technology and things like that? One of the things is you have to learn to work with, to develop what's interesting in the state, what you have the capacity for. Speaking as someone who works in Bangalore, I know that Karnataka is very interested in quantum, for example. So the government of Karnataka is putting a lot of resources into building quantum and across the academic field, across startups, across state government incentives, that sort of thing. And so you have to, you were talking, sir, about building capacity, and that's the other thing. So what do we have that, what is a certain state good at that it can develop? And then other states can learn from that and build on it. And what, for example, does Bihar offer? What can UP offer? What can Kerala offer? Somebody was talking this morning about untapped potential in Kerala on this. So there's a lot of decision making that has to go in the states in terms of what do we want to prioritize. And then there's what can we share with the other states who are also interested? What do they know that we want to build on? And then there's the question of now how do we then work with the national government on that, the central government on that. So it's a question of scale, governance at scale. How do we want to build up from the local to more national? And then how do we integrate at the state level what the government wants to do, what the broader Indian strategic ideas are, what policies do we want to project, how do we show ourselves in the world, like these are our priorities. We want to, there was a lot of talk about not relying on Western or US data sets. And then there's also the question of what do the Chinese have? What do they offer? How do they build their own systems? So one of the things India can do is offer a different perspective than the West, but also within a democratic system. Not all of us have China-style leadership. So if we're interested in democratic systems, then I think that's another way India can show some leadership. And should be talk between center and states on how do we work top down and bottom up on this. So I think really India's comparative advantage in terms of what it can do with building AI capacity, building resilience, building up the tech. It's like we don't have any particular single policy that like this is what will be done. So we reform slowly, incrementally. We see what's happening. We take best practices from where they are and try to apply them. And I think I'll just end by saying we should learn across states and across governments as a way to, that's what the ideal should be. Like someone was talking about ideals earlier. So what can Karnataka learn from UP, learn from Kerala, learn from Meghalaya, what can we learn from each other? I think that's what's important.
Thank you very much, Anjali. So essentially, we're looking at governance at different levels too, not just at the national level or just subnational level. We are also very interested in local governments, as who impacts your daily life. So on that note, I'll like to request Guru Prakash Paswan to also come up with, what are the best practices that you have come across that you can share? Or do you have any ideas? Like we have Niti Aayog, which has come up with best practices, compendiums, portals, upload. We have competitions from Ministry of Jal Shakti, where I had attended once, the Sujalam Bharat conclave, where they're just mapping what are the best water conservation practices. So everything has become like in the competitive spirit and in the cooperative federalism, different states are being made or incentivized to perform better. So maybe you can give some remarks on that. Speak to the mic, keep it for 5 minutes. We'll try to draw more from the audience later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And grateful to the ORF and Nalanda University for organizing this brainstorming session here. I'll start from sharing an example because I work at the intersection of politics and policy. And as someone who was involved in the recently concluded Bihar elections, we saw the scale and the magnitude of people's aspiration when it comes to governance. It's very difficult to imagine that in a state like Bihar, like we are in Bihar right now, and you also have a perspective that the sort of things that we promised in our manifesto and how we're going to keep pace with it. It's difficult to imagine, but we sort of took that quantum leap and said we are going to deliver certain key projects like how do we develop Bihar as a center for AI hub, as a production center for semiconductors, as global capability centers. So I think the governance gap, which essentially we are talking about, is something which we deal on a daily basis, and it's a key challenge. We accept it. But when it comes to governance specifically, and like you said, we have to keep certain things on our mind, like for a society like us, we are shaped by social hierarchies, regional backwardness. We just spoke about border vulnerabilities and an uneven state capacity. So certain foundational requirements which we should have in mind fundamentally when it comes to governance is to deliver social justice, dignity, and inclusion in growth. Some of the key examples, especially in the last 11 years, we have seen on the ground at the level of local self-government is we have sort of transitioned from symbolic welfarism to right-based mechanism. In the sense, the technological interventions that has happened in the last 11 years specifically, which used to be an elite capture, has now become last mile justice. Key examples that have inspired other jurisdictions as well. The JAM Trinity, the direct benefit transfer of 34 lakh crore and above. Saturation-based schemes, when Prime Minister said that Santushti ki taraf, how do we saturate everything from what seemed unimaginable 15 years ago, ODF, accessibility of water and electricity. Like I come from Bihar and I've seen from Patna, you would have traveled here, it took us only a couple of hours. Only 20 years ago, it took us about 7 hours, 7 to 8 hours from Patna airport to reach to this place. So I think when there is a political commitment to inclusion, when there is a political commitment to good governance, it actually happens, it delivers. But like you said, governance operates at different level. The transition which we must also speak about is what happened from Planning Commission to the Niti Aayog. As someone who has worked at the Planning Commission, I have been witness to how the unelected, unaccountable members of Planning Commission were sort of acting like principals, and elected chief minister used to go there and make a presentation. Last year, we had an outlay of 11,000 crore in education. We delivered this and this. So how that has undergone a massive fundamental transformation from the Planning Commission based financial allocation to 14th Finance Commission recommendations, where more and more states have come up with mechanisms that can offer. For instance, Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Yojana. There are multiple such schemes where we are seeing that spirit of cooperative federalism, which is very much in existence. Another key area which I think is important to speak about is how do we maintain fiscal discipline with pro-poor infrastructure? Capital expenditure has seen a threefold increase in the last 11 years. The rural roads, railway electrification, digital connectivity, and one key initiative which is less discussed about is the PM Gati Shakti scheme as well. Logistic integration, which is benefiting hinterlands. Infrastructure somehow has become a social justice instrument by connecting marginal regions to market service and mobility. For that matter, there are examples of this place. So this place is known for a very good dessert. It's called Khaja. Like right 500 meters from this place, there is a place called Silav, and it makes world famous Khaja. It's a dessert. You enjoy it after your main course meal. So how do you develop a startup ecosystem at the ground level that empowers these micro and small medium entrepreneurs to deliver at the global stages. But coming back to the session, which specifically talks about lessons India can draw from and offer to other federal and developing countries, I think Aadhaar, UPI, CoWIN, which we saw during the equitable vaccine access, DigiLocker. So I think the focus now, when we speak of governance gap, is the fundamental reorientation of our approach. It's growth plus welfare, not growth without welfare. India has avoided the trap of Latin American debt-driven populism, African aid dependence, but we have combined PLI manufacturing strategy, infrastructure expansion, and so on. So this, in a way, tells us that if we empower the states, if we empower the local self-government, which still has to be, like it was imagined in 93, 94, when the 73rd, 74th constitutional amendment came into picture. But increasingly, as we are sort of approaching the deadline of 2047 of Viksit Bharat, the VB Ramji initiative also, the key thinking behind this initiative is to empower the local panchayat, Viksit Gram, Viksit villages for Viksit Bharat. So I think there is a need to reorient our policy, reorient our governance, and bring back focus to our decentralized units for empowering the local disadvantaged, deprived, and the marginalized communities.
Thank you, Guru Prakash. I think you have rightly put that Viksit Gram is going to be a building block of Viksit Bharat. And in that context, where you talked about different changes, interventions, and also innovations, I would say, because even now government innovation is an important component of the development aspects. And how do you fill up the governance gap is also through innovation. So on this note, now invite Mr. Srinivas Chokakula, President and CEO of the Center for Policy Research, New Delhi. In this context, I suppose that you have a long and deep presence in the policy research space. I leave it to you what you want to talk about, actually. Yeah, you can also use the lectern.
Thank you. Thank you for that freedom to speak whatever that I want to speak to. It's very kind of you. And very good afternoon. This is my first think tank forum, India think tank forum that I'm attending for the first time. So thank ORF and Nalanda University for having me here. And the second thing is that it's quite interesting, and partly because I mean, somebody said in the morning that it's as if like you're coming home. For me, it is truly coming home because this campus is spectacular, fantastic. And the designer happens to be someone who founded our school, where I passed out, which is School of Planning, Ahmedabad. So the architecture is very similar, so I feel pretty home. And also, I'm pretty conscious that I'm given 5 to 7 minutes, and I hope to finish this argument. I'm not going to respond to all the questions that are there. Just wanted to focus on one topic, the center-state negotiations that were meant here, and just put forward one argument for you to consider. I hope that the 5 minutes that are given to me is sufficient. I should also congratulate the organizers for, really a well-drafted concept note. I really liked it, at least. The way it is articulated, the kind of changing world that has been described in just 4 terms: geopolitical realignment, technological disruptions, climate change risks, and social transitions. Really nice way of putting it up. So how can India build resilience to respond to some of these challenges that are out there? And I mean, I have given you a hint about the kind of argument that I'm putting it up is that India is a federal democracy. So it's about how center and states can work and how states and states can work with each other towards responding to these challenges. And they will have to pursue this, at least they have to confront at least those which are very important, specific to India, which is those developmental aspirations and coping with those risks that are brought by both climate change as well as otherwise, And the third one is about how you can encounter the external, confront the external stresses. How do you respond to that? What kind of federal democratic or federal governance model that we can conceive? If you want to draw or exchange notes on federal governance models, there are not many that you can compare with India. At the most, closest is perhaps United States of America. And you've been told in the morning session that that's not where we are looking at. So India will have to, first of all, I think it has to be almost a sui generis developmental governance model. Obviously, we will be looking out things that we will have to draw on, but the kind of models that we'll be looking at is something that is driven by the structural contours of both history and geography that has been highlighted in the morning session. If you look at history, India is a federal democracy because it is necessity. It is not a choice. It's actually by necessity that we had to be a federal democracy. That India was brought together through a federal compact between several princely states and, almost considered to be sovereign states. So that has been articulated by the 7th schedule. The negotiations were the compromises that were made to bring India united. That is reflected by the 7th schedule organization of powers. So if you want to unpack or unlock the developmental potential, whether you want to call it through developmental demographic advantage or dividends or other kinds of resource potential that you have, you will have to go back to that federal compact. And given the kind of changes that we have, given the kind of risks and challenges that we are confronting, we will need to revisit that federal compact. So if you want to revisit that federal compact, you will have to relook at the way these powers are organized between center and states and how it needs to be negotiated. Now, why do you need it? That is something that has already, it's partly because if you look at whether you want to talk about developmental aspirations, whether you want to talk about risks, particularly that of climate change, or whether you want to respond to a radically transforming change of technology, you will need to get center and states together to respond to these in a very comprehensive and coherent manner. Now, that is, as you can see, it's basically coming together, which basically means that the action has to transcend these territorial boundaries that we have between states and as a nation. Now, that requires, you can't actually stick to those organization of powers that has been cast in the Constitution, which is that these are state subjects, these are central subjects, union subjects, and these are concurrent subjects. Now, you could see that there is tension that is evolving, and then GST is one of the examples where the country had to engage in a long deliberative consensus building process to come out with the GST reforms that unlock the potential. And that has to happen with everything. And I'll just illustrate with looking at the geography. India is specifically, the geographic context, that it's a Himalayan region and connected with the peninsular region. And then if you look at the map and the kind of India's approach that Professor Chaturvedi talked about it's not just about pursuing developmental goals, it's also about preserving your ecosystems like rivers. So you look at the map of India, you're talking about 25 river basins shared by 36 federal constituents. So you do need robust federal response to deal with to pursue your own developmental interests, but also to cope with the kind of risks which are likely to be and more likely to be extraterritorial. So how do you want to do that? I think that is where we need to basically rethink about the 7th schedule organization of powers and then talk about possible ways of rebuilding a new federal consensus. So there is a need for investing in both political and institutional avenues for pursuing a federal consensus on issues of those that are important for both developmental as well as coping with risks. Let me just illustrate one instance. You want to respond to China's super dam. How are you going to do that? the proposals have been there for a really long time that we need to respond by building structures that would moderate the likely floods. Why have we not delivered? It's because of the kind of the conflict in interstate interests. And now, if you look at the way it is being pursued, you are not there in the race. You don't have the kind of federal consensus that is required for the states to work together and states to support the center to respond to these kind of external stresses. It's the same with pursuing the developmental goals, whether you want to do it through inland navigation, through interlinking of rivers, or, for instance, recently, no one expected before Trump came into the power about the kind of tariffs and the kind of possible impact on sectors that we want to compete with China. Fisheries. Take example of fisheries. It is a state subject under the 7th schedule. You don't have structures and processes for the states that have the fisheries developmental potential to work with center to navigate these very difficult global markets. Now you have tariffs. You don't know how for instance, the state that I belong to, which is Andhra Pradesh, which contributes to almost 35% of the export potential of fisheries, and put India in I think it is the 3rd position compared to, we contribute to 8% of the fisheries export compared to almost 30% of China's fisheries export to the global markets. So if you look at these kind of state subjects that are considered to be state subjects, those we need to relook at the way we provide these institutional and political avenues for unlocking these sectors. It doesn't have to be that we reorganize this and then we go through this. It's more about carving out functions where center can facilitate states and the states can work together. And I can elaborate this argument, but I know that I'm taking more time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. So the governance gap as such, as one would understand, is not purely just administrative. It can be political. There can be gaps in political supportability. There can be gaps in fiscal issues. There can be gaps in institutional capabilities. We can also have gaps between the intent and the policy that is made. You can also have gaps between the design and delivery. There can also be gaps between what the nation wants to get done in terms of priorities and different regional diversity issues come into play. So on this note, I'd like to invite Professor Chetan Singhai from Chanakya University, am I right? It's nothing. To give us a more of a global blueprint solution in the sense what was discussed in the morning. Can India craft a development-oriented governance model that reconciles national priorities with regional diversity along with the other deliverables? Thank you. And of course, you have, 5 minutes?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Albert. I think answering that question is going to be a task because it's quite a wide and very complicated question. Rather, I would try to build a case for that, and maybe we can have a discussion and also further afterthought, because the best analogy I can think of that if I attempt to answer that question, it's like standing before lunch here and looking for food for thought and food waiting outside. So it's very difficult to even imagine how deep we can go and how wide we can get in. However, let me also first situate how do we appreciate this governance gap. Because on one hand, we see the questions on internal capacity. On the other hand, we look at expectations outside. So borrowing from anthropology, what they say, the ethic endemic. And Ambassador Srinivasan put very rightly and also very aptly in terms of our reflection in the first panel that between hope and despair. So at a domestic level, there's a lot of hope. And at the global level, there is despair on various fronts. And how we look at India in that context is something that we need to reflect and appreciate the gap. And how this gap is not merely administrative, but more strategic is something that we need to reflect upon. And all the co-panelists flag their set of thoughts, concerns, and ideas. So the question here for the larger question that you posed is, should we adapt and adopt a uniform policy framework or a differentiated pathways? The latter is more appropriate given the diversity that the nation has And though we have national priorities set, but when it comes to engaging on the ground, we need to reflect on the differentiated pathways that one has. The best case in point would be education and health. Both have a national policy. What is interesting is that. Second interesting component is both are not in the union list of the constitution, right? So education falls under the concurrent list and health and the state list. And both we see now the country being engaging closely with implementing, on one hand, the national education policy, which I was part of, and the health policy, which is now rooted into state. Now, what we see in this tension is the developmental agenda. I would like to bring to the notice of the audience. There's a very interesting book by Shashi Budhiraj on the title of the panel, more or less, the governance gap, how India can position itself in terms of national priorities. So he flags three important domains. One is the DPI, which we talked about, the health, and also various other national strategies. So one example, let me flag here for our reflection. The example which Mr. Guru Prakash also brought in the context of Viksit Bharat 2047. And this is where I go back to the epidemic problem that we were talking about, how we see ourselves in India and how the world is looking at India. In fact, on December 4th, we had our book on strategic realignment coming, where the core question is how India sees the world and how world sees India. And that's the latter part which we need to reflect upon. Here, I would say the four pillars that we are referring to in the Viksit Bharat are farmers, poor, women, and youth. Now, we had very good examples by Mr. Guru Prakash. Now, the concern here is the potential solution to reflect on these four aspects I would put in is, one, we need to address four gaps that exist to appreciate this larger gap, or what I can call in colloquial terms, to mind the gap. One is the institutional gap, the normative gap, and then the compliance gap. And then we also have the knowledge gap. The knowledge gap is the potential solution to start with in the order of our approach towards appreciating the challenges, because most of our policies in India are driven by experience and expertise and very limited evidence. And experience and expertise is good, welcome, but evidence trumps both. On the other hand, once we focus on the evidence-based approach towards policies where the knowledge gap is to be filled, which further strengthens institutional capacity and questions the normative position that exists. For example, we are driven by advocacy, activism, and then analysis. Can we reverse that frame? We have analysis based on the knowledge gap, then engage in advocacy, and then drive our activism. I think these two are the issues that are largely problematizing the question that you raised, rather than I would answer them, in other words. So when we talk about this shift, the other four P's tend to become important. And this is where the developmental gap is to be filled gradually. The first P, of course, is people. Second one is purpose. Third one is process. And the fourth one is performance. The fourth one again feeds into the other three, because often our monitoring process is not that robust as we see the first one. See, local governance has built us people-centricism, no doubt. It has also taught us lessons and also given good insights on how to take this forward. But the purpose is something which is missing. So is it driving towards administrative reforms, or is it driving towards the strategic reform? Is something that we need to align. And hence, that's why it's very hard to answer the question in black and white. So I'm still keeping it as gray. So if I have to put in perspective 2 points to take away. One, I think we need to get to the local approach. While we build our aspirations globally, what is our local standing and how one has to correct that? We have to see inside out rather than outside in. Second, shift from actor-centric framework to system-centric framework, because most of these schemes, targeted population, support schemes that are coming, they're more actor-centric rather than systems approach. And as I said, the example of education, health, which they actually don't talk to each other. Ideally, they should be talking to each other for the larger context. So these are my quick thoughts. I'll be happy to add on for questions that are there. Thank you.
Wonderful consolidation of the entire panel discussion, which I was supposed to do. So that saves me the time and also the responsibility. Thank you so much. I congratulate the panel